Hi there, my name's Aaron Lanterman. I'm a professor of electrical and computer engineering at Georgia Tech, and I'm looking for alternatives to the C and C++ programming languages that fill the same kind of niche as C and C++. And if you, the viewer, know about any languages that I've overlooked that I should have on my radar screen, please leave a comment below. I'm particularly looking at languages with manual memory management, so languages without a garbage collector. These would be the kind of languages that you would write a garbage collector in. I'm not anti-garbage collection. I use a lot of garbage collected languages. In fact, I mostly use garbage collected languages, and it's a great tool for certain tasks, but there's some tasks for which GC is inappropriate. I should also note that I'm not looking for a single replacement for C and C++. I consider C and C++ to be very different things, even though C++ is vaguely based on C. I consider C to basically be portable assembly language, and you should use C when you would otherwise write something in assembly language. C++, on the other hand, is trying to be a higher level language in which you would write something like Photoshop. Although C suffers from some terrible syntax choices, it has a certain elegance to it, and it's reasonable to imagine that one might write a relatively simple compiler for it, whereas C++ compilers are probably some of the most complicated programs in existence. My issue with C isn't that it has pointer arithmetic. I want to have a language that's close to the hardware like that. My issue with C is that it was designed in the 70s on machines that are not nearly as powerful as the machines we have today, and some of the design choices in C have to do with the fact that they had to write relatively simple compilers to fit in those machines. For instance, header files. In 2022, there's no reason a language should have to deal with C or C++ style header files. My issue with C++ is that, in addition to inheriting whatever wackiness C has, it's also an unholy abomination of a language. It's pretty much Frankenstein's monster at this point. On the C++ replacement side, I'm not really looking for object-oriented associated capabilities. Although I think object-oriented programming has been oversold, I'm not against it. I'm not an OO hater. I view programming languages as tools, and I view programming paradigms as tools. And there may be cases where OO is an appropriate paradigm, but there's definitely times where I think object-oriented thinking makes programming harder than it actually should be. I'm interested in two specific application domains, one being embedded systems programming and the other being game engine programming. Ironically, the language on my radar screen that's probably most well known is the Jai programming language by Jonathan Blow. It's ironic because it's not publicly available yet, although there is a closed beta, so people are using it. Jonathan first introduced the ideas of this language back in 2014 through a series of videos and live streams on YouTube. He's the developer of Braid and The Witness, so he brings a lot of game programming experience to the table. Jai has some really interesting metaprogramming aspects with compile time execution, but we can't actually try out Jai right now, so let's move on to Odin. Odin, the data-oriented language for sane software development, should not be confused with Odin, the object-oriented develop interface for nuclear magnetic resonance, or with the Odin project, which I guess starts a career in web development. It also should not be confused with Odin, a project to run Microsoft Windows programs on OS/2. Odin, the programming language, doesn't seem to have its own Wikipedia page, but I think it should, so somebody get on that. If I look at the Odin GitHub page, there's commits from 2 days ago and 6 days ago. This is the kind of activity I like to see. Odin is probably the closest to Jai as far as all of the other languages I'm going to look at in this video go. Ginger Bill, the creator of Odin, is motivated by many of the same concerns that Jonathan Blow is. And I highly recommend you check out Ginger Bill's YouTube channel. In addition to talking about Odin and doing some programming demos, he also talks about C programming and rants about C++ and other stuff. Odin has complex numbers and complex number arithmetic built in, and that makes my electrical engineering signal processing self very happy. And look, it even has quaternions and quaternion mathematics built in, which makes my 3D graphics programming self very happy. It has a built-in matrix type along with matrix manipulations of various sorts. And it doesn't provide operator overloading, but since it has complex numbers and quaternions and vectors and matrices built in, you already have most of what you would use operator overloading for anyway. And check this out, it even has shader code style swizzling. And it has official libraries for every major graphics API, including Vulkan and Metal. And it's apparently used by this special effects software called Embergen. So, out of all the languages I'm looking at in this video, Odin is probably at the top of my list of languages to check out. Another interesting new language is Zig, which seems to seek to be a better C. Like Jai, it seems to have some interesting compile time execution metaprogramming kind of features. Zig does have a Wikipedia page. Zig is the creation of former OkCupid engineer Andrew Kelly. And taking a look at the GitHub, let's see, the last commit was 3 days ago, so definitely under active development. The third main language I'm interested in checking out is the Beef language. I think it's lesser known than Odin and Zig, but it's pretty interesting. The one thing holding me back is it seems fairly Windows specific. Every time I see build from source, I cringe a little bit. One interesting thing about it is that it has an IDE written in Beef that was developed alongside with it. That's a special IDE just for Beef. The language looks to me like it has something of a C# flavor, although it compiles to machine code. It doesn't compile to some sort of .NET or Java virtual machine kind of thing. Beef was created by Brian Fiat, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, co-founder of PopCap Games. So that probably explains a preceding line that says this project is not in need of financial support. I would be more enthused about it if there was a macOS version of the editor, but it looks like that would require quite a bit of work. It's very much pitched as a game development language. There's even a sample game that's compiled down to WebAssembly so you can play it in a web browser. And let's see, the last GitHub commit looks like it was something like 6 days ago. So there you go. To give credit where it's due, I first learned about Beef from the channel Games from Scratch. And I should probably mention that Beef, the programming language, should not be confused with Beef, the browser exploitation framework project. That sounds like something very different. So Odin, Zig, and Beef are the main 3 languages I'm interested in looking at. I also wanted to mention Vala, which came across my radar screen. Vala is very much a better C in the sense that it compiles directly to C, and then you're expected to use a C compiler after that. It's very closely tied to the GTK framework. It's also the language of choice for developing elementary OS apps, and Elementary OS is one of the more interesting Linux distributions out there. If you have experience with any of these languages and would like to share your thoughts on them, or if you can think of a language that I haven't mentioned that I should put on my radar screen, please leave a comment below. Before someone mentions Rust, I am interested in checking out Rust, but I put Rust in a different category all on its own. Rust is built around the idea of defined ownership semantics and the borrow checker, and those are interesting ideas I want to explore, but I consider them their own thing. So I should have said at the beginning, I'm looking at languages that have manual memory management and that don't have a borrow checker. I guess there's also Google's Carbon, which is supposed to be a successor to C++ that emphasizes interoperability with C++. But I think I agree with Ginger Bill that because it's emphasizing that interoperability so much, it's inheriting a lot of C++'s cruft, and I'm more interested in clean slate approaches.